Hey everyone, Tru here, and today we are going to do an in-depth review of the new SSR Cleopatra. This mega poison imposter unit has a lot of potential for great interruption in the enemy teams. So we will look into her strengths and weaknesses, which tier she will likely go to, and first, what her AI looks like. Her threat level increases by 20% if there is a poisoned enemy unit. That makes sense because of Mirage Serpent being unlocked then. And a similar logic applies with the second modifier. Her hate level increases 20% if there is an imposter on the enemy team. On the one hand, this makes sense because then she can use checkmate and in general is a menace, but on the other hand, this also helps her because as long as there is an imposter on the enemy team, she cannot be defeated. That means if she draws in attacks while this condition is active, the imposters will be sacrificed, and if there are not any left, her hate will actually decrease, giving her a chance to hopefully put some more imposters on the enemy team. Her basic go-to skill is the snake bite. However, she will prefer to use the Mirage Serpent if there is a poisoned unit, and this should likely take priority over the checkmate, except if there is no poisoned enemy and there is an imposter on the enemy team, then going for checkmate. All of this, of course, only applies if she cannot use the Dusk Mirage, which takes absolute priority, which is good because this is a must-use skill. And looking at her advantages, her pros, the Dusk Mirage is actually the first point on my list. This is really a strong skill. Besides the fact that it is an instant skill, it is this kind of exchanging a unit for an imposter that we previously only saw really with Watercolon, who was released 2.5 years ago and managed to stay relevant in the meta for quite a long time just because of that huge disruption skill. Keep in mind that Watercolon's imposter skill was also weaker in many ways, one of which is that hers was just a pushback to the enemy, while in Cleopatra the Dusk Mirage skill is actually leaning more towards a banish direction, meaning the unit isn't quite pushed towards the end of reinforcements most likely, but somewhere in reinforcements, which is much more disruptive than just a simple pushback, and can possibly actually mean something like a banish, where the unit that is being pushed back isn't in the race for quite a long time afterwards. This also matters if we have some team consistencies or some units that do not go well with each other. We do have right now the kind of dichotomy between Cursed Sleep and Burn, with Cursed Sleep right now, of course, being dominant in the meta with Kaguya and Sleeping Beauty. However, in many top teams, it is still a liked feature to have basically a burn team to close out their arena lineup that is containing 20 units. With the kind of Dusk Mirage, somebody like Sleeping Beauty or Kaguya might actually end up in the middle of such a burn team, which right now isn't too big of an event, but it might be later and in the other way around situations when burn has a resurgence. Now, we already saw in the AI analysis that Dusk Mirage will take absolute priority in her AI. So when Cleo comes onto the battlefield and gets her first turn and has enough spirit, she will definitely use Dusk Mirage. And if afterwards she still has enough spirit, then she will be able to use Checkmate. In total, that will take 4 spirit, but is a very strong combo to start things off because her first attack can ignore passives that keep an enemy unit alive, meaning Dusk Mirage might put a guard away from the battlefield, opening up the other 3 units to a checkmate attack that deals 600% damage and ignores this kind of passive. So this is a super strong combo start, especially because if that checkmate skill actually kills off an enemy unit that is not conjured, it will also trigger Cleopatra's passive that introduces additional imposters on the enemy team if she kills non-conjured units. This means if you have a good start with Cleopatra, you might end up in the situation where you already killed one unit that might actually be very, very hard to kill for other units, and 2 imposters on the enemy team with just the other 2 units actually remaining to do some work for the enemy. And this kind of Queen's Domain passive can really potentially debilitate the enemy team even further, with every kill that Cleopatra gets on the non-conjured units, adding more and more imposters. Plus, the Dusk Mirage, of course, is getting locked for 200 time units, but afterwards she can immediately use it again, which means in certain battles we can see imposters galore, and then there's just a single unit maybe of the enemy just fighting for survival amidst imposters that do not help it at all. This is even more important because of the other passive features that Cleopatra has for the imposters. The imposters basically acting as her life insurance, being sacrificed whenever she would die, which heals and purifies Cleopatra fully. And on top of that, also whenever an imposter dies, all non-imposter, non-sleeping units are getting mega poisoned and stunned for 50 time units. This isn't even the only way for Cleopatra to mega poison units. Of course, she also has the Mirage Serpent available, which deals 600% damage to a poisoned unit and afterwards mega poisons it. So an enemy unit with normal poison might have a very bad time if she even survives the attack at all. Cleopatra can set herself up for this Mirage Serpent skill with her Snake Bite, a skill that I like very much because it's basically a poison attack with a kind of blast feature where we also saw 300% damage on every second time this is being used. And on top of that, there is a 25% chance that the enemy hit by this attack is actually getting mega poisoned instead of normal poisoned. +1 spirit and 50 time unit costs like we are used to from these kind of blast skills. But I really do think that this might be the strongest blast skill yet. Now, Cleopatra is a bit vulnerable at the start, at least if there are no imposters on the enemy team yet. And so she really needs to get the turn and put the Dusk Mirage out. And for that, it is really helpful that she gets all these kinds of wards at the start, similar to Giga Rolosha. She has one-time immunity against sleep, against stun, against poison. However, notably absent from this list, and now we are getting into the cons, into the weaknesses territory. Absent from this list is the burn ward, of course, and that means that she might be quite vulnerable to burn, which could become relevant if burn has a resurgence. We already know that Gilgamesh will be coming soon, but to be fair, Cleopatra is by far not the only one of the recently released strong units that has such a burn weakness. However, in any case, this could be a problem because her speed is not super fast, and if a strong burn attack hits her before she gets her turn, she will not survive the Endure, cannot change that. And speaking of her Endure, it is a bit unfortunate that she only has this one Endure that she gets when she enters the battlefield, and that's it. Afterwards, she will rely on the imposters to survive. But speaking of that, something that I forgot in the pros section of the video is, of course, that while there are imposters on the enemy team, she cannot die to non-attack damage. This, again, is something that is really nice if she is burning, if she is mega poisoned, if she is poisoned. But, yet again, a but, if the imposter on the enemy team sacrifices itself before she gets hit by an actual attack, this may also mean that she immediately dies to that kind of non-attack damage immediately afterwards. Now, after the wards are gone, she is obviously vulnerable to all kinds of status effect attacks, but this isn't even her biggest issue, I think. The problem that I see with her is definitely her spirit hungriness. Okay, the biggest problem is maybe too big of a word, but it is definitely one of the problems, because her only skill that actually produces spirit is Snakebite. Everything else just needs spirit. And yes, Dusk Mirage only costs 2 spirit, which, considering what it does, isn't too much, but if she doesn't have that 2 spirit, despite the skill being unlocked, then this could be very, very problematic for your team and for Cleopatra's survival. That said, Snakebite is a nice skill for her to use in that situation, but she must really hope to get another turn with more spirit afterwards. And she might already use up some of that spirit with her other attacks as well. I mean, Mirage Serpent, considering what it does, 1 spirit cost, isn't too hefty. But Checkmate, after that kind of initial combo, I'm not a huge fan of. Both of these attacks do not ignore armor, and she also doesn't have any attacks that attack more than 1 target, although that is something that might be forgiven, given that the kind of Dusk Mirage might actually open up units hiding behind guards on the enemy team. Now, as a last point on the list of cons, Cleopatra, of course, is a poison unit that kind of likes to encounter poisoned enemies to use her Mirage Serpent on. But nevertheless, I do find the synergy with other poison units a bit questionable. Yes, she can work with somebody like King Arthur. However, I don't really like the idea of having her with Loki and Angel Reset. And all 3 of these mentioned units also failed to bring back poison as a big thing back into the meta. And it is a bit questionable whether Cleo will change that, because her skill set is really more focused on the imposters. And while she herself has skills that mean these imposters should survive for longer, other poison units, including Loki, might not be so lucky. And while yes, it has a nice effect to kill off imposters while Cleo is on the field, she also definitely relies on these imposters to stay alive. So killing them off mindlessly might not be the best tactic. All that being said, the majority of voters sees her go to the SSS tier in my tier list. And she definitely has the potential for that, giving the kind of strong synergy effects with Savage Unit and, of course, the huge disruptor potential against the enemy team. But one big question remains: how does she fit into the meta top teams? Can she be combined really well with sleep teams? She can be combined with sleep units, which are currently oppressive in the meta, but the question remains if there aren't other units that are giving better synergy effects for the cohesiveness of a platoon 1 potentially. And she really does like to be a starter unit, given some of her limitations, but she can be used in later platoons as well, with much more power and impact compared to somebody like King Arthur. And so if she is relegated to the later platoons in most top teams, then the SSS tier will not be possible for her. In any case, she can be a super strong unit and also be a good finisher, given that even if she comes in late, she can still wreak some havoc with these kind of imposters, hopefully finding easier kills as well. And very importantly, she is yet again a unit that works really great at 1 copy already. Of course, it will be much harder for her to get these kind of kills, but the support factor with the Dusk Mirage kind of banishing and wreaking havoc potentially on an enemy team might already be enough to She might eat a little much spirit with her checkmate attack then if she doesn't have a lot of power, but besides that, she is really a unit you can count on for just one copy. So I think this is something that most teams might consider getting. That is it for today. I hope you found this analysis helpful. Let me know your thoughts on Cleopatra in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to become a true carrot. And as always, thanks for watching.